What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, I am back, this time with another Transformers animated retro review, but today we are putting a slight spin on it, because we're not just going to be taking a look at one character, oh no, we're going to be taking a look at two, arguably the biggest and the baddest ones, those being both Optimus Prime and Megatron, the two leaders of the Autobots and the Decepticons. And I'm going to be real with you guys, when I kickstarted this throwback series off way back in January, one of the characters that I was the most excited to revisit would have to be the animated Megatron. Personally, alongside any of the live action movie renditions, I think he has one of the most badass Megatron designs of all time. You know, turning him into a helicopter, which then turned into the meanest mother of a robot, literally was a genius idea. But before we get into Megatron, we're going to start things off with Optimus Prime, and here he is. This is the Voyager class version, the one that I think is probably a little stronger when in comparison to the deluxe release, and I guess you could kind of call this perfect timing, because we are expected to see a Transformers legacy version of this guy in 2024. And will it be able to hold a candle to this guy? I'm not too sure, because it's definitely going to be a tough act to follow. But here he is in his truck mode. I do believe this specific incarnation of Prime was supposed to be a fire truck, and you know what? It did an amazing job in kind of reimagining him. Now, in terms of the truck mode, I will say the colors definitely do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of that iconic look, but it is so cool. You know, animated had a very specific, striking design aesthetic, and I think you can perfectly see that here in the truck mode of Prime. You know, the very striking angular design of the front of the truck just looks awesome, and as we spin it around to the back, you guys may be noticing quite a few accessories which are missing, and that's just because unfortunately I bought this second hand and the seller failed to tell me that he was incomplete. So unfortunately I don't have the axe which turned into kind of the back canopy for the truck, nor do I have the water cannon, and that was one of the kind of most classic accessories that this guy came with. But instead he threw in this axe, which to my knowledge is the one that came with the deluxe version of Optimus Prime, but unfortunately the back of my Prime does look slightly bare. But it's a really cool looking truck. You know, I love the light bar here for the top. This is what he looks like from the underside, but surprisingly there isn't too much of a difference between the animated Optimus and the Eartherized version in terms of scale. Now, we are dealing with roughly Voyager scaled releases. I understand that this guy was packaged as a leader, but let's all face it, without that trailer he 100% would have been a Voyager. And as you can see, do you know what, from kind of the bird's eye perspective, they appear to be exactly the same, especially as we turn them here to the side. Although I'll say one thing you guys won't be able to tell is the difference in terms of the plastic. The animated version feels way more dense than this Earthrise release. So yeah, Hasbro were definitely cooking up some solid plastic back in 2007, 2008, and not to mention all four wheels are pinned on, meaning this guy has no problemos in rolling out into the battlefield. Now, with that being said, we've pretty much covered everything here for the truck mode. Transform and roll out! And bang! Here we have animated Optimus Prime fully transformed into his robot mode, and damn, that was such a fun montage to film, because his conversion may just be one of the sleekest that I am yet to see for an Optimus Prime figure. And I mean, look at it, in terms of robot mode, near enough spot on to that character design. I keep on banging on in some of these Transformers animated reviews just how accurate these figures were to how they appeared on screen, and you know what, I'm not going to stop, because so far I'm yet to kind of find a bad Transformers animated figure. Hasbro were on something completely different way back in 2008, 2009. I mean, you got to bear in mind, this was the era where they gave us the amazing Revenge of the Fallen leader class Optimus Prime. So those designers literally were god tier. But anyway, as we check out him in robot mode, super nice. You know, much like the truck mode, a massive reimagining of the Optimus Prime character design, but immediately recognizable. And I'd say, you know, the head does a pretty good job in capturing how he appeared back in G1. I mean, you can see the mouthpiece, which looks really awesome, wicked paint. You know, they definitely didn't skimp out on that aspect, and I love the way the chest looks. And something which I think this particular figure captures perfectly would be the stature, you know, kind of the design of the animated Optimus. He had this very cartoonish S kind of shape to him, and this just looks so spot on to that. It's unreal. And in terms of kibble, what kibble? I mean, as we spin him around to the back, besides this tiny little light bar, he literally has next to no kibble, and also barely no hollow spaces besides the tiny little cutouts that we have on the inside of the forearm. So yeah, quite literally an incredible looking figure. The only downsides I'd say that this figure has would be a kind of loose waist. You know, maybe I wish it was a little tighter. It's due to the way he transforms and whatnot, so I guess I'll give it a little pass. But this guy also has a super sick gimmick. So I think this was around the time of when the Michael Bays were kind of dominating Transformers, and they incorporated a super sick distinctive characteristic that he had, that being a retractable mouth guard. And look at that, Optimus actually has a mouth, and I know some of you guys will forever always keep that up, but that is such a sick feature. Love to see it. Now, as I said beforehand, unfortunately I don't have any of the specific accessories that this Prime came with, but I do have this axe, and I will say something, you guys are not lying when you say this might just be the most accurate axe for an animated Optimus, because he looks incredible whilst wielding this, and despite this being intended for a deluxe, I don't think it pairs too badly with this Voyager. Now, I'll very quickly go through his articulation. You know, we do get a good old head swivel. Surprisingly, these kind of double jointed shoulders, that's awesome. So that, you know, they can hinge way past 90. Full rotation. We even get a bit of butterfly due to the way it transforms. Bicep rotation, elbow joints, waist rotation. You know, the hips can kick forwards, back, out to the sides. A little bit of swivel here at the knee, a little bend at the knee. The only area where he's lacking would be ankle pivot. So, to be quite honest with you guys, for a 2008 Voyager, this thing was not slacking in the articulation department. But despite me massively gushing about this figure, we still have Megatron left to look at, so let's check him out. And here he comes, here he is, the big, the bad, the animated Megatron in his helicopter mode. You know, an alt mode which unfortunately we don't tend to get too many of in terms of Megatron or just kind of Transformers in general. I know it's kind of made a return in Transformers Earthspark, but let's all face it, any of the figures we've gotten off that design have kind of been crappy. So it is amazing to get this big chunky leader, and unfortunately I also don't tend to review many of the old pre-2010 leaders over on the channel, so this is definitely going to be an experience. Now, in terms of size, this thing is massive, well and truly a prime example of just how enormous some of those old pre-2010 leaders were, but check out the details. You know, for the most part, for this being kind of a first pass at a leader animated Megatron, I think they got the helicopter mode pretty bang on, and you also have to bear in mind, this thing isn't that complicated to transform at all. I'd say you can get it done in maybe under 20 seconds if you're super fast, so yeah, that is pretty impressive. But in terms of his gimmicks, because those old leaders were all about gimmicks, he had quite a few. So basically, his swords of the robot mode would convert into the propeller blades of the helicopter mode, which in itself is genius, but as you would rotate one, the other side was also meant to rotate along with it. Now, as the years have progressed, and because this is second hand, the gimmick has kind of begun to get a little bit stuck, so that does suck. But do you know what, back in the day, I bet it definitely worked a trick, but it would have been awesome had there been a little button that you could have pushed and then they would have just, you know, rotated on themselves. But the next big bad gimmick would be electronic lights and sounds, which to me really made those old leaders so special. So as we flip here to the underside, we get this big old Decepticon logo, because where are you going to put the button unless it's the Decepticon logo? And simply you just hold it and watch this. You get the propeller blades powering up, and then if you consistently hold it, that kind of rotary sound will continue, and the second you let it go, it will power down, which I thought was so awesome. And the cockpit also illuminates a pretty nice red, which despite this being, what, 16, 15 years old, still does light up really nicely. And check out kind of the internal cockpit detail we have. It looks like there's a seat in there. We get this fat-ass fusion cannon here at the front, which unfortunately I don't own the missile to, but still, it's pretty cool. And the way you'd kind of use it would be you'd smack this button, and bang, the missile would shoot out, and then you take the end of the fusion cannon and kind of cock it back into place, which I thought was awesome. And all of the landing gear was rolling. You know, it didn't have to be a commander class to get some pins on those wheels back in the day, so yeah, that's sick. But kind of something which I haven't seen too many collectors talk about is that you could remove this whole fusion cannon portion of the helicopter to expose kind of a hidden landing gear right here at the front of the cockpit. Not too sure why you'd want to do this though, because we do have this massive gaping hole on the underside, and you can clearly see Megatron's head. So yeah, that does kind of suck. But before we get stuck into his transformation, here is a very quick comparison alongside the Earthrise Optimus Prime. And as you guys can see, these leaders were definitely leader class for a reason, because my goodness me, is this thing monstrous in its chopper mode, and trust me, it's even bigger when we get it into the robot mode. So yeah, pretty damn impressive. bang, here he is, the big, the bad, the animated Megatron. And like I said beforehand, I really do think this is one of the baddest looking Megatrons that has ever been brought out. I mean, the design is just so incredible, and to be quite honest with you guys, I think the reason why we haven't seen too many Transformers animated redos in the last couple of years is because those original figures were just so incredible that anything that is going to come out is either just going to be a direct carbon copy or is going to pale in comparison, because honestly, I don't know what they could do to make this better unless they were to give us like a masterpiece which was maybe a little bigger, got rid of the electronic lights and sounds, and perhaps refined the backpack a little bit, because this for a leader class, again, I think is so awesome. And I think this is one of the figures that gets quite a bit of a hard time from collectors, but I'm not too sure why, because I am really impressed with this guy, and in particular would be the face sculpt. Now, like I said beforehand, one of the biggest things that made these old leader classes a leader class, besides the huge scale, would be the electronic lights and sounds. And I've collected pretty much all of the live action movie leader class figures. I have never seen a gimmick which is this awesome in one of them. So what you're going to want to do here is smack your finger on that big old Decepticon insignia and watch this.
Crush the Autobot. Where is the Allspark?
Not only does he speak and the chest and the head light up, but the mouth and the brow move. I mean, that is so awesome, super expressive. And do you know what? The second I saw this, immediately I thought, wow, it is such a shame that back in 2008, they didn't decide to bump Blitzwing up to a leader class, because can you guys imagine the type of gimmick he would have had? I'm almost certain that, his expressions would have been able to automatically switch around, and that each of the face would have had a mouth which would have opened and closed. Just would have been awesome, but
Crush the Autobot.
that is just so cool. I love the way the brow and the mouth move. But yeah, really big chunky leader figure. I will say, because he has like 2 AAA batteries smacked in his jetpack, he is very top heavy, and because the legs, much like Prime, are kind of slender and they're at that weird kind of S angle, he is a little top heavy, especially when you smack the fusion cannon on, which I'll showcase in just a second. But yeah, look at this big old Megatron. And you know what? Despite him having that electronic gimmick, you could move the head around and the mouth and the LEDs would still work. So yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome. And ratchet joints were the big thing about old leaders, and this guy was packing them. So we got some heavy duty ones here for the shoulders, for the elbows, for the hips. I mean, especially the hips going out to the side. That's amazing. And even some here for the knees. And surprisingly, despite this being like 15 years old, we get some really awesome ankle pivot and a bit of waist rotation, despite him having a battery pack in his back. So yeah, this guy is so cool. So happy to be finally reviewing him. But we got to talk about firepower. So of course we get the massive fusion cannon, which did become the front of the aircraft just a second ago. What you're going to want to do here for bot mode is slide those little ridges into the notches that we have on the forearm, and bang, there is Megatron complete with his kind of G1-esque fusion cannon, looking awesome. Now I will say one of the biggest issues I have with this Megatron would be the shoulders. They appear to not quite tab in. So the whole back assembly, due to the helicopter mode, is on this mechanism where if you raise the wings, the arms are meant to fold inwards, and then if you collapse the wings, they recess backwards. But it doesn't quite click into place, meaning that there's always a gap between the shoulder and the chest, which is a little annoying. But yeah, that looks awesome. And then as you saw, the propeller blades do become his actual swords here for the robot mode, which I thought was such a genius use of those blades. Whoever designed these characters back in the day as well, get them on the most recent Transformers show, because honestly, they were cooking something incredible back then. But yeah, honestly, enough gushing about this Megatron. Let's bring out a few comparisons to really show you just how enormous he was. And the first figure that I want to stack him up against would be the most recent Studio Series leader class, that being the Rise of the Beast Scourge. Now, whilst upon first glance, taking into account how many years have passed since the animated Megatron, there doesn't really appear to be that much difference in terms of size. What I will say is that animated Megatron feels something like 4 times heavier than Scourge, and that is no exaggeration at all. I've said so many times, it would be amazing to see Studio Series figures had they came out back in 2008. I think they could literally have been in a complete league of their own, because the only area where I think the newer Transformers kind of lack in would be their size and the quality of plastic. 9 times out of 10, figures don't hold up as well as they used to do 10 or 15 years ago. So yeah, it is a little bit of a shame to see Hasbro cheapening out with a few of their materials, whereas the engineering for the most part, I would say, has kind of held up quite well. Here he is alongside what appears to be kind of the go-to for contemporary comparisons, that being the Earthrise War for Cybertron Optimus Prime. And as it's still a double review, here he is alongside the animated Voyager Voyager Optimus Prime. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I chose these two because I think they are the best in terms of their accuracy and scaling to the show. And I love the way these two look. You know, Megatron being this big, hulking, towering presence over Optimus has always been something that I love to see. You know, Prime should have a big old formidable force to go up against, and just making Megatron much bigger than Optimus I think is genius. You know, we saw it in the 2007 live action movie, and it's great to see it carried over here into Transformers Animated. And wrapping up on this throwback review for the Transformers Animated Voyager class Optimus Prime and Leader class Megatron. To tell the truth, I have no idea how I'm going to create a follow-up video to this, because these two figures might just be some of, if not one of the best animated figures that I've checked out so far. In particular would be that Megatron. I mean, for a Leader class, he was just smashing it. Incredible looking robot mode, great copter mode, very easy transformation despite how accurate he is in both modes, and those electronic lights and sounds are incredible. And not to mention, you know, this also goes for Optimus. The designs of the animated characters are top tier. You know, they were some of the best redesigns that I think we've ever seen, alongside Transformers Prime, alongside War for Cybertron. They were so nicely done, and these figures are a prime representation of just how cool they once were. So I'd love to get your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you guys think of these two in particular? Out of both of them, which is the one you prefer? And what other animated figures would you guys like me to take a look at in the next video? As always, I thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.